Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, we're going to go over some older cinema cameras, and I'm going to let you guys know, is it still worth it to purchase these cinema cameras? And I'm going to let you guys know why I'm selling my last cinema camera and if it's a good idea or not. So yeah. So if you guys have been subscribed to my channel, about a month ago or so, I posted a video about this camera. I've had this camera for, I don't know, maybe 6 months. So this is a Canon C100MK2. So obviously it's an older cinema camera. And don't mind me, I have some notes over here on my iPad, so I might be reading some stuff. But I just want to compare some specs and everything. So like I mentioned, C100MK2. So the important part about the Mark II is it has dual pixel autofocus. So if you pick up the Mark I, it might have autofocus, but it was a paid upgrade that a lot of people got from Canon if they got the C100 Mark I. So if you're picking up a C100, make sure it's the Mark II, or if it's the Mark I, make sure it has the autofocus upgrade. Because if it doesn't, the C100 Mark I doesn't have autofocus then. So yeah, Canon camera, so obviously uses EF lenses, EFS lenses, work better in video, or some L lenses, some newer L lenses also were kind of optimized for video a lot better. A lot of the older Canon lenses were kind of noisy in video, so if you're going into this ecosystem, kind of do your research on some lenses and everything like that. So for this one, I have 50 millimeter STM lens. So yeah, STM lenses were quieter and they were better for video. And I also have a 24, I think, EFS lens for this one. But this camera only shoots 1080p, but it has a 4K sensor. So this camera has an 8.3 megapixel sensor. So if you upscale this footage from 1080p to 4K, you get a pretty clean image. Obviously, it's not true 4K, but it's a pretty good image. So I highly recommend, if you're shooting with this camera, toss the footage on a 4K timeline, because when you're delivering to customers these days, everyone expects 4K. So I think delivering 1080p, I don't think it's the right idea on 2024. So if you're going to use this camera, like what I used it for, I shot a charity event, so I set this up on a tripod and, you know, just forgot about it. Shoots 1080p. So if you put a 128 gig card in here, it's going to shoot forever. It uses these big Canon batteries. These are BP975. So I have a bigger one and a smaller one for this. So yeah, it shoots forever, obviously, in 1080p. So it's only 8-bit footage. So obviously not the best. Also, it has 2 SD card slots. That's another big thing about this camera. SD cards, obviously super cheap. You're shooting 1080p, you can get cheap SD cards. And you know, it will keep up with this camera because it doesn't shoot in any high-end codecs or anything like that, only 8-bit. So you can use a cheap SD card. But obviously, don't use a cheap SD card if you're afraid you're going to lose your footage. So, but you can go more for a V30 card. You don't need to use a V60 or V90. So yeah, this camera is pretty cool, pretty awesome. Like I mentioned, shoots forever. The menu system for an older camera is super easy, I think. Built-in ND filters, XLR inputs on the handle. You have audio levels and everything over here. So yeah, super cool camera. So I'll let you guys know why I'm selling it. So I got a new pickup. This just came last week. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with this one. Sony FS7. So you might see a lot of videos about this camera, how it's a Netflix approved camera. So a lot of documentaries were shot on this camera. People still use these cameras. It has autofocus, but if we're comparing to the C100 Mark II, that has better autofocus, has dual pixel autofocus. While using it at a concert, I noticed, obviously it's center weighted focus. You can switch between wide and center, and it's still, obviously, the subject has to be in the center. And I've noticed if it's a stationary subject, it's not going to focus on it. So if something's moving in the center, it's going to focus on it. But if it's something stationary, you kind of point it at it, it's probably not going to focus. So autofocus is not great. But this camera has a lot to offer compared to the C100 Mark II, but not everything's a benefit. So 4K video, this shoots only 1080p. So 4K video, 10-bit video, internal. So obviously you have that. They both shoot at 60, 30, 24. But like I mentioned, C100 Mark II, only 1080p. This 4K, 10-bit. So big difference. Also, in this camera, you have C-Log. In this camera, obviously you have S-Log 2, S-Log 3, obviously common Sony log footage formats. So C100 Mark II also uses SD cards, like I mentioned. This uses XQD cards. So XQD cards are not very common. Let me take out one. So yeah, XQD cards, not very common, and they're expensive. So a 64 gig XQD card is gonna cost you, I think, around $100, 128, 150, something like that. I got my 120 gig one used, so I paid under $100, but that's a lot for these cards. So these older cards, but still very expensive. So that's a negative for this camera, obviously. Another thing. So this camera, ISO 850. Shoot at that, you will get the cleanest footage. So let me power this bad boy up. Yep. So I don't even mess with ISO half the time in this camera. I just keep it at 850. I have shutter angle on, and I just mess with the ND filters, and that's about it. ND filters and aperture. So it makes it super easy. Now we're gonna look at the FS7. So FS7, if you're shooting S-Log 3, minimum ISO is 2000. So that's a big difference. So you have to use ND filters. Obviously, if you're outdoors shooting at ISO 2000, you're gonna have to use ND filters. So that's good that it has built-in ND filters. But that's another big issue. Obviously, 850 is a lot more flexible than 2000 minimum. So yeah, this camera is not perfect. Obviously, it's an older camera. Ergonomics also. I know some people make fun of how this camera looks like, but I think it's super cool. It's super light, super portable. You got a side handle, top handle, super cool package. FS7, a lot bigger. So the used camera I got does not come with the side handle or the side remote. So I only have top handle, but you could obviously have a side handle for this also. But this is a pretty big package. Also, LCD screen on here. It's not part of the actual body of it. So it's kind of external. It's got a cable running. C100 Mark II. Built-in screen. Flips forward, flips back. Super cool. So let's talk about why I went to the FS7 for the C100 Mark II. Simple answer is I'm a Sony shooter. So I have an A7 III, ZV-E1. I have a bunch of Sony lenses. So honestly, number one reason, I'm a Sony shooter, so I have a bunch of E-mount lenses. Number two reason, this doesn't shoot 4K. Like I mentioned, you can upscale and it looks decent, but it doesn't have built-in 4K. Since I got the ZV-E1, I love 10-bit footage. It's just so much easier if you underexpose, overexpose by a stop or so. You can, get it perfect in post, and it's a lot easier than with 8-bit footage. If you start messing with 8-bit footage, it kind of falls apart very quickly. So yeah, those are the main reasons. So some of the things I'm gonna miss when I'm gonna sell the C100 Mark II. Cheaper memory cards. better autofocus. Another big thing. So like I mentioned, I shoot 10-bit 4K. I think it's the I codec. I forgot what it's called. But in that bitrate codec, whatever it's called, on a 64 gig card, I only get 30 minutes of footage. So my 120 gig card, I only get 1 hour of footage. Obviously, I can switch to different formats and everything, but some of the features are disabled if you do that. So another big thing I don't like with the FS7, when you change to different formats, you lose a lot of features. So when you shoot in Cine EI, you don't have auto white balance, and it kind of turns into a full cinema camera. So it's less of a run and gun type of camera and more of like you have to adjust your settings. Yeah, it's just, it makes a lot of things harder. You have this side toggle, and then you can program different white balance settings into it. So over here, preset 1, 2, 3. So you would have different white balance settings. So I usually shoot in custom. So I can put a white card in front of it, do white balance based on that. Or I can put in auto white balance if I'm going in and out. So it just prevents me from shooting in Cine EI mode. And yeah, so this camera is very quirky. You might change one setting and then half your menus are going to be grayed out. So kind of pay attention to that, play around with it. It's just a harder camera to learn. Obviously, I'm just getting into cinema cameras right now, so it's pretty new to me, but I'm kind of letting you guys know the pains and everything I've had. And if you guys have any tips for me about the FS7, leave them in the comments. Let's start a conversation. Let's help each other out. But like I mentioned, a big thing is what lenses do you have? So I didn't want to buy more lenses for the C100 Mark II. Because I'm a Sony shooter, I have a bunch of Sony lenses. So I went to FS7. Obviously, I could go for the FX3, but I already have a ZVE1, which is, let's say, 70% of that camera. Obviously, there's a FX6, but that camera is $6,000, so it's a big difference. If I didn't mention FS7, I got it for $1,000 in this package. One battery, no memory cards, no side handle. I don't know if it's a good price or bad price. Let me know. If you guys picked up FS7 recently, let me know what you guys paid for it. But yeah, a lot more quirky of a camera. I like the footage that's coming out of here. Autofocus is pretty bad, and the files are just kind of big in the setting I want to shoot. So right now I'm going to show you guys some footage from the C100 Mark II and the FS7. So C100 Mark II. This video is going to be 4K, so I'm going to toss it on a 4K timeline. So we're going to upscale it from 1080p to 4K. And the FS7 is going to be 10-bit 4K footage. So obviously, the FS7 footage is probably going to look better. But I want to show you guys how good the C100 Mark II footage looks when you do upscale it to 4K. So yeah, check out these two samples right now. And then we're going to have some closing thoughts about these cameras and what I think. And I plan on getting more cinema cameras, older cinema cameras, just giving them a try and taking you guys on this journey. So I want to get into some red cameras maybe next. You know, if you guys recommend any older cinema cameras to me that I can pick up, check out, play around with, and take you guys on this journey, let me know. But yeah, let's take a look at this footage right now. So yeah, let me know which camera footage do you prefer. Do you prefer the upscale 1080p from the C100 Mark II, or do you like the 10-bit 4K from the FS7? So in conclusion, I think both are amazing cameras, but if you're just getting into the cinema camera realm of cameras and kind of learning. Maybe you're kind of new to this, or you just shot on mirrorless before like I did. I would recommend the C100 Mark II more, but I just think maybe I'm gonna learn more on the FS7, use more manual focus, and just kind of learn actual professional cinema camera settings and just grow my skills from there. So yeah, thank you for checking out this video. If you guys have any recommendations for me for the next cameras I should purchase, any older cinema cameras or anything like that, let me know in the comments. And yeah, thank you for checking out this video. And if you're not subscribed, make sure to subscribe so I can keep on creating content like this. So yeah, thank you guys.